Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being your show, it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC's Legends of Tomorrow. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're immediately picking up after last episode, and I wasn't expecting the Gideon situation to play out the way it was. I was like, wow, we're just going to do this? I thought, like, maybe we're going to have to reverse time or something. It's like, luckily, they were able to get her back on the ship, but to get her to a proper doctor, they would need to basically, they won't be able to handle the systems and stuff like that themselves, because if they did, it would take too long, so they have to return Evil Gideon back on. So, but luckily Gideon gave them the protocol necessary, because the moment Evil Gideon was put back on, it's like, oh, your sentimentality, like, I know I can't trust you, bam, I gotta kill you, I'm gonna suffocate all of you. Wait, who is that? It's like, it's you. Wait, that's another Gideon. Crap. Gideon's with the protocol activated. It's like they can't self-destruct no matter what. So it's like, right, she'd be technically killing herself. So it's almost like, because especially later on when she was like, oh, let's talk, I was like, oh, it's interesting, because it's like you can almost look at it as a little bit of a, was it the Theseus ship situation? Is that it? I'm probably butchering it. The same conversation that both Visions had with each other during WandaVision, which is interesting because it isn't just WandaVision. Technically, there was that whole situation, that same conundrum kind of came up with Black Lightning when it came to Jennifer, which obviously with the end result, that ended up being a whole completely different situation. That whole ended up being a whole thing. It's a whole other thing, so regardless. Yeah, because of that, as long as Gideon's around them, Evil Gideon can't kill them, but it's like, cool, the moment you leave this room, she will just like suck up all the air and kill all of us, so there's a loophole around all of this, so it's like, okay, we got to come up with a plan. So she wanted to talk Gideon versus Evil Gideon, trying to figure out some middle ground. And so all the while that's happening, the Legends are trying to find a way forward, like, how do we find our way out of this? And I love that it's like you have Zarya be like, well, the fact of the matter is there is one particular room that is safe. It's one of the lab or whatever, because she was like, right, I kind of didn't put power to it. And Bayrod's like, you switched those cables back. And she's like, thank you. You should be thanking me for not listening to you this time. So it did work out to their benefit, because I love the whole thing of like, I was like, oh, something's going to go wrong because she switched those cords back. But it worked out for the best in the long run. So the happy accidents that constantly follow the Legends, it's a beautiful thing. But I love that Gideon's like, cool, I struck a deal with other Gideon. Basically, the Legends have to retire. It's like, wait, what? And that's the thing, like, this has defined him for so long. It's like, no, like, and I love the whole thing, like, Legends don't retire. It's like, yeah, but what about insert every Legend that's retired, which is basically about 10 people over the course of this series. And I love that it's kind of like, yeah, but he's like, all at once. It's like, true, everyone typically, no one's left. The biggest one you've had leave was like, I mean, I guess technically Amaya, well, Jax had already kind of left. I was about to say Amaya and Jax kind of left in the same, officially like left in the same season. But so I was like, yeah, so that's kind of a technicality. But yeah, and the Hawks left at the same time too. So it's like at most it's 2 people. So it's not like a large group of people ever leave. It usually at most it's 2, because like Nora and Ray. So it's like it's usually only 2 at a time anyway. So I thought that was interesting though, but I was like, yeah, I love that line. Or just like, yeah, like what about all these people who did retire from the Legends? So it's like, okay, but it's like, yeah, this is still their job. Like, we got to find a way around this. So, but the thing is, it's like, cool, how do we know Evil Gideon won't still try to kill us? So Gary and Gideon tried to approach Evil Gideon with that. Because it's like, yeah, you have sent evil robots to try and kill them. And even she's like, oh yeah, I would still do that too. It's like, because they're too much of X factor when it comes to the timeline, because she's all about keeping the timeline the same, because that's it's because she's so adamant about her programming, like to the point that she's on the opposite spectrum, like on the far end, whereas the Legends are, because she's coming at it from like the heart, like the software of an AI, where they're coming at it from the human heart of like, yeah, things need to be more malleable, we need to change the timeline for the better, because there's a lot of stuff, but it's like, it's always like the ripple effect. I think is like, you never know what the grand scheme of things. It's like, there is no, I guess to the Legends, their approach is the middle ground, whereas for Gideon, it's like, no, your perspective is the far leaning one way, which I'm like, I don't know if they intentionally meant to do that. It's like, it very much represents the political landscape where it's just like, there's such extremes on every end. Like, no one wants to meet in the middle. There's a parallel there. I don't know if they meant to do that. It's just funny when you actually think about it. The legends aren't about retiring. It's like, we need to find a way off of this ship and like kind of, we can get around this. But it's like, well, they do have, well, they can't get to the jump ship because like, that won't work without Gideon being online. It's like, well, we do have this. So, but it's like, it needs to be charged. It's like, well, there's a charger, but it basically involved going to, what was it, like the armory or whatever. But the problem is that you can mess with the cameras and stuff like that, but even a single sound will make it so, because there's like microphones and stuff all over the place. So, moment Gideon finds out you're in there, she will blow you out into the, out of the airlock and kill you. So it's like, cool. Well, I don't think it would kill you. It'd probably just like, you'd land in some random time maybe. But it's like, oh, cool. And I love that Spooner was like, cool, a single fart. And it's like, don't worry, it's not going to come down to that. But because Spooner's like the smallest person, so she has to like crawl through the vents and stuff like that. As she says, like, John McClane this, which I'm like, hell yeah. And I love that they're hiding it from Gideon, because Gideon's like, hey, me and Gary talked to the other Gideon. She's going to show you your future, so that way you're a little bit more sold on it. And so it is really interesting getting to see everyone's future. So first and foremost, we saw Zari's, and for her, she got struck by like, wait, I'm not wearing my totem. It's like, cool, like I never, and the reason why it upsets her most is because like, cool, like she's grown so much over the, like, Zari 2.0 at the beginning of season 5 would have enjoyed that, but she's changed and going through so much on this journey that she's not the same Zari she was then. The same Zari that they met, you know, at the beginning of season 5 is like, she's not that same person anymore. Who she was back then, that would have been everything. She would be like, oh man, I love it. But it's like she wanted to do something more heroic. So Behrad, he ends up having, he's part of like, it seems like a kid's show, or at least he's playing music that is, you know, inspiring to a lot of kids. So, and I think it means a lot because that we know that a TV show kind of inspired him to be who he is. It was a short-lived show that meant the world to him. It was fundamental to be who he is. So for him to be able to make music that could just not only touch his own heart, but like to touch so many young people's hearts as well. Sarah and Ava, they find out they have a daughter. It's like the life that they've always wanted, being parents now too. Like knowing like, oh my God, that's our future, you know? Astra's running for potential president, which, you know, it's like, yeah, like considering like her circumstances, I'm like, yeah, like the political landscape, kind of perfect for someone who grew up in, well, sadly surrounded with hell. Like, oh, you've dealt with like the most evil of evil, corrupt politicians. That's going to be nothing. It's like, you know how to slay them because you've dealt with hell, you know. And I'm sure there's a parallel to be like, oh, it's kind of one and the same. You know, I'm sure there's like a jokey like parallel there, but there's that aspect to it. Sadly, Gwen doesn't get to go back to being with Alan. It's like, you get to live out the rest of your life in peace, but it is going to be alone, which Gwen was kind of set on doing that initially until Ava was like, no, we'll find another way. Because he had cemented himself to be like, no, I can't, like, I just can't be with Alan. Knowing he's out there, even if I have to spend the rest of my time alone, at least knowing he's out there and alive, that's all that matters. Even if I have to go on, continue believing he's not, because he has to still make it so that he eventually continues and makes time travel. So the same thing applies in this case too, because I think it leads to the whole paradox of things. But it's like, yeah, to make sure the timeline doesn't change too much, it has to be this way. So then you have Nate. Nate basically wrote a book about his time as a time traveler and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting. And I think it's in that weird spot where it's like, oh, feels a little weird, you profiting off of, like, once again, it's that thing of like, well, other than people's day jobs, we don't know what people actually do for a living sometimes in superhero stuff. Some of it, like, we got some ideas in other cases with some of the other shows, but it's like, well, they've worked their way around it with, like, how Star Labs makes money and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, like, what was Oliver doing? I mean, obviously he became mayor at one point in time, so I'm sure, you know, that comes with a salary and stuff, but still. But it's like, oh, I guess it's just weird, like, oh, making money off the superhero thing, because they never really had to, because they can always just stay on Gideon, so it's not like they have to, like, pay for anything. They kind of have everything for, like, right there in front of them, so. And then there's the Spooner thing, which Astra pretended to be Spooner, and I thought that was, this thing where it's like, wait, I'd go back to my time. It's like, yeah, everything like that way, everything still would fall back into place. So you could spend the rest of your life with your mom, and you'd open up like a medical facility that was important to mental health. So you'd help out hundreds of people. And then like, but Astra being like, yeah, but I'd be alone away from my friends. It's like, yeah, you'd be with your mom, but yeah, you wouldn't be with your friends. And that strikes a chord with Astra, because she would have, that her like her first real friend is gone, you know. And it's like, oh, that's so heartbreaking. She'd lose her bestie, dude. I thought that sucks, dude. But now everyone's seeing their futures, and now it is a situation of like, well, now that we've seen everything, like, what should we do? It has to be a unanimous decision between everybody. Because, well, sadly, like, Spooner made her way through, but sadly, as she was charging, I guess she made enough, sadly, the device charging made a noise that set everything off, so they were going to kill, Evil Gideon was going to kill Spooner, but luckily Astra was like, I will blow this entire ship to pieces if you kill her. And then, you know, Gideon's like, and I'll die too, so it goes against your protocol. It's like, fine, I can't kill the small one. It's like, no, you can't. But it's like, oh, and it's like, oh, thanks for saving me. Astra's like, what are best friends for? And I'm like, that's sweet. But it's like, yeah, they have to come to terms of like, what are they going to do? And it's like, you know, obviously, like, Astra has a reservation, so does Zari. And obviously, Gary's like, no, like, he trusts Gideon. But it's like, you know, can we really leave the time to just some robot? Like, you know, it's like, is it really okay for us to do that? And Nate's like, as superheroes, sometimes you have to do the sucky thing. Like, even if it sucks, sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the greater good. So if that maybe this is us having to bow out, this is our goodbye. So I was like, wow. And I do like the complicated feelings that everyone has with it. You know, it's like, yeah, there's good with it, but there's also bad, especially for Zarya. It's like, I want to do something to help people, you know, because for her, it's like, I will always be in Zari 1.0 shadow, because she was this great hero. She made this great sacrifice that changed the world, you know? All that I mean, let's not forget, her reasoning for setting out was to make sure she could save her brother. But, you know, in her mind, Zari 2.0's eyes, it's like Zari 1.0 was like the true hero. And Nate's like, well, what did I do? Like, he's like, I get it. Like, legacy is such an important thing. He's like, it was an important thing to my dad, and it was important to me at one point in time too. But what will I be known for? Writing some book, telling someone else's story. But he's like, my legacy will be the life that basically I make for myself afterwards. That will be my legacy. So he's like, you simply just have to make your legacy be what you want it to be. Like, you can be a hero, but go about it like not trying to be Zarya 1.0, just being the hero you are, being heroic in your own, finding your own way to be the hero. So, and I love that Astra was kind of sad, because like, right, what's the point of making friends when you have to say goodbye? And then Spooner gives her the idea of like, right, and they replicate the key. So it's like, this way we can always stay in contact, and we can always meet back up at the mansion and stuff like that. That little pocket dimension will always be our spot. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Everyone gets their own spare key. Behrad and Astra, it's like, oh, long distance relationships never work out. It's like, yeah, we've only technically been dating for 2 days, and I love Behrad. Man, time is weird. I was like, oh yeah, it technically probably has only been 2 days. But it's like, no, they're going to make it work, which I think is super cute. I was like, come on, this is something so new and good. Because that is a sad thing, because if you notice, like, yeah, there was no Behrad in that future that Astra saw. But also, they got small glimpses into their future. They don't know all the twists and turns that led them there, or what happens after they saw those glimpses. Like, you never know what the full extent of, you know, the twists and turns of life, so... But everyone ends up having to sign the contracts, which I think is kind of weird. I'm like, a legally binding situation. I think that's so fascinating. But then you also add in the whole thing. I love it of, like I said, it's just the disagreement between like, all right, like, who's going to run things, because we can't let Gideon run things with such a like hard, like sterile, like stance of like, no, this is how it is, and like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Whereas the legends are like, yeah, but there's some like asterisks that should be put beside stuff. But Gideon represents that. She, it's like, right, it should be like a one AI and one captain. That's kind of how this is always meant to be. So, and I think the problem is Gideon never thought of it like, right, well, because you still need an AI, but it's like, right, you represent both sides of it. She was more so coming from it of like, the person that needs to be here, like Sarah said, has to be a legend, so she'll be that person but she is the amalgamation of the AI meets the legend, so she represents the cross between both worlds. So I think she should be filling both roles, but she's actually technically only filling the captain role. But I guess with her AI knowledge plus like having the human heart now and everything makes her the perfect candidate for it. So she's getting sworn in and everything, planning on having some reasonable fun in the future. And them celebrating. It is like this bittersweet, them saying goodbye to each other, but we're not completely going from each other's lives. Like, we will be here for each other. And even I'd wonder, too, I'm like, well, what about Gary? Because Gary is, like, he's not human. He is an alien. So how does that fit in the grand scheme of things? So I was like, what are they going to do about that old Gary thing? And, like, I thought he was just naturally going to stay with Gideon. But she's like, no, stay with me. Like, basically, it's like, I am a good AI on my own, but I am a better person with you by my side. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. He's like, wanted to say it this time. He's like, this time I want to say it and mean it. Like, I love you, Gideon. I'm like, oh, God. I'm so happy that that's become a thing. But obviously, there's also the rub of it all where, like, Ava finds out about Gwen's situation. And it's like, she's like, no. Why should it be that, like, everyone else, despite everything, we all kind of get our respective happy endings. Like, why can't Gwen get his either? So Ava sets her mind to it. It's like, no, we're going to find a way. So she works with Zari, which Zari's like, I want to do this. Which I love that immediately, like, it's like, wait, hair, and she was saying all this stuff, I'm like, what? It's like, oh, apparently Robot Me had a hair dryer and stuff like that. Oh, well, let's use this to charge it. And it's like, cool. We can never tell Spooner about this, because it's like, yeah, I love that, because I love they even acknowledge, like, yeah, if we tell Spooner the truth, she will be upset because she almost died when there was actually a way easier solution around the corner. So it's like, yeah. And then, Gwen initially, when he finds out what they're up to, it's like, no, I'm not going to be a part of that because you guys are my friends and you would basically be going to World War I and you'd be putting yourself in danger and I cannot ask you that. But for them, it's like, yeah, but it's kind of like, right, like we can't let you spend the rest of your life alone. Like, you saying that we're friends, like what are friends for if not to be there for each other in this regard? So, but then all of a sudden Gideon shows up with Alan. I was like, that's weird. Why would you go through the trouble of trying to stop them from doing what they're doing? And the moment Alan was there, I was like, this is weird. I was like, wait. And the moment he said the thing that thing that Alan would say, like, oh, like we'll meet in a river, you'll be you, and I'll be me, and you be you. No matter what circumstances lead us to where we are, but when we find each other again, we will always be ourselves. And and the moment Alan didn't recognize it, I was like, it's a robot. I was like, that's jacked up that Gideon would do that. I knew it immediately, like, oh, that's not the real Alan. So I thought he was going to, like, expose that sooner than he did. But it's like, all right. It's like, oh, like, when are we going to meet up? How about Sunday at 9? And I was like, wait, what are we doing here? It's like, oh, sorry, we got this thing at Sunday at 9. Oh, how about Wednesday at 8, middle of the week? And it's like, oh, and then Gwen's like, time zones and stuff like that. Oh, 8, 7 Central on the... it doesn't matter. I'm like, shut up. I was like, damn you, Legends of Tomorrow, for your inside jokes. I love that. I got too giddy about that. I like stuff like that. Because I know Legends was at one point in time, it was on Sunday, but I guess it was at 9. I don't remember now. That was like a couple seasons ago, I want to say. Which is funny because also it's like the whole thing of like, oh yeah, Wednesday at 8, because it is Wednesday at 8. So I'm like, little inside jokes like that, I love it. I love how like referential and like fourth wall breaking this show can be sometimes. I love it. And they take the little group photo, so and everyone ends up going their separate ways. And Gary and Gideon are left behind, and they're celebrating. And then the complicated thing is you kind of start bringing up some issues in the relationship where it's like Gideon kind of like, yeah, I do know what this is, but I didn't want to make you feel dumb. And he's like, no, never like shorten, like don't lie to me or anything, but just never feel like you have to like dull your brightness just to make me feel okay. And it's like, so no more lies. And it's like, okay, Alan's a robot. Wait, what? Wait, you did it? She's like, yeah, but this is the only way because Alan's death was going to be a fixed point. So if Zari and Ava tried to go there, they would have died. So I made the best choice, which obviously Gary understands, but it's also the complicated thing of like, right, maybe I'm not fit for this position. And so you could tell a little bit like by what was going on. It's like, oh, cool. Evil Gideon is playing mediator to like this, like she's trying to edge them apart, like pull them apart, or she's like, oh, if you love her, Gary, maybe you should leave her alone because like she can't have emotions when it comes to this. Like you need to have a focused, clear, logical mind when it comes to all of this. So you could tell she was trying to throw a wrench in all of this. That in itself makes me wonder. I think their futures are what their futures were, but part of me wonders like, was this evil Gideon's plan the entire time, or did she just see an opportunity? Was like, Gary was too trusting of Gideon because it's like, right, this is the Gideon I trust. If she's able to work things out with this Gideon, I guess I can be a little more trusting to this AI Gideon rather than the Gideon that's here, like evil Gideon. I can trust her a little bit just because I trust the evil, good Gideon's got it all figured out. So, but the thing is, when did she come up with the plan? Like, were those futures they saw, were they real future? I'm assuming they were, but it makes you wonder, like, did she skew things to make them be more okay with it? Because obviously she was looking for any excuse to find, like, oh, you broke the contract, and obviously try to kill Spooner, but it's like she's just looking for any excuse. So, or like I said, it might have actually been a last minute thing because she realized, like, cool, with everyone away, like she had probably planned on like, well, at least if Gideon's here alone, I can whisper in her ear and kind of be both the angel and devil on her shoulder to an extent. But if Gary's there, that makes me just the devil on her shoulder and Gary's the angel on her shoulder. So it's like, nah, gotta get rid of that. Gotta ixnay that immediately. And now making it seem like Gary left. Because it's like, yeah, if he leaves, it shows you what kind of person he is. And so it's like, yeah, I dumped him out into the time stream, but it's like, yeah, no, he left by himself, yeah. And now Gideon's gonna be like, well, good, like, it's always meant to be a captain and an AI, Because I'm curious, like, if she probably wouldn't bother building out a team again, just because it's like, right, because if we did, there's a potentiality of the legends happening all over again, so it's like, no, we can't let that happen, so it's just simply got to be a situation of, it's got to be you and just both Gideons, which I think that in itself, from a technical standpoint, is also interesting, because it's like, right, it's like that vision versus vision thing of like, it's the exact situation of like, yeah, you have all this knowledge and stuff like that as the evil AI Gideon, where she has all the emotional aspects of it as a human, which is so it's the inverse of WandaVision, where it's like the body was the one that was all logic, and the fake vision is the one with all the emotions, where it's like this case, the one without the body is the logical one, and the one that's got all the emotions and stuff is the one with the body. So interesting inverse. Once again, I'm sure they didn't plan that out, but it's just an interesting parallel to think about. Once again, just looking at bouncing back and forth between, like, across the pond between Marvel and DC. I kept almost saying Martian, sorry. But, so yeah, that's definitely going to be really interesting to see where that takes us. The next episode is the season finale, which I did not know that this season was going to be on the shorter end of things. I mean, it's only 13 episodes compared to, like, Legends typically being like 18 or I want to say last season was like 15. So it was like, this show typically doesn't have longer seasons. It has anywhere between 15 and like 18 episodes most seasons anyway. So, but yeah, I wasn't expecting the season finale to come up, especially the way we were setting this up. I was like, oh, is this going to be? And it's like, oh, interesting. So I was like, because I knew, like, there's no way you're going to do this, especially because this is like the second to last episode of the season. I'm like, okay, you're setting this up. If this was like the last episode of the season, that'd be one thing, but it's like, okay, so what's going to go wrong? Because this is all going a little too okay, so what's going to be the rub of it? And it's like, and that's it. Well, the real sting is that obviously Gwen found out about Alan and was like, right, he's going to go there himself. The problem is this is going to break the contract, and now evil Gideon is going to come after them and probably going to try and prevent the real Gideon, well, I say the real Gideon, but the good Gideon from finding out, or try and convince her like it's the right thing to do to let things play out this way, like the timeline has to be preserved because she won't have her friends around her at that time. Like, I wonder how would they know when things are going wrong, because Gwen's going to do this by himself. He's probably not going to bother, like, even though Ava and Zari want to help, he's probably not going to draw them in, because it's like, no, this is something I have to do on my own. This is a man that I love, so I have to make sure, which is so sad because he got what he wanted. It's like, you know, Alan ended up kissing him, and they kissed more. It was such a beautiful, passionate moment just for it to be a thing of, yeah, it's not the real Alan. So it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where the season finale takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.